having a terrible time breastfeeding.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with that, does it?
Her mom is like, oh, I thought she'd be more of a milk cow than that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah, you don't.
And of course,
No.
nobody would say anything though, because what can you know? None
Right.
of us know anything.
No.
I had my own daughter tell me, well, Mom, these are different now.
Right.
I said, yes, they are.
Yep. For
Ah,
sure.
well.
Yep. What time do we have now?
The quasi minister there said you could go.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome to Emmaus Church. We're so glad you're here this morning. For those that came through the ice and the fog and the weather, thanks for being here. If you could stand and sing with me, we're going to start with Come Thou Long Expected Jesus.
Come, thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free. From our fears and sins release us. Let us find our rest in thee. Israel's strength and consolation, hope of all the earth thou art, dear desire of every nation, joy of every longing heart. Born thy people to deliver, born a child and yet a king, born to reign in us forever. Now thy gracious kingdom bring, by thine own eternal Spirit, ruling all our hearts alone, by thine all-sufficient merit, raise us to thy glorious throne. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. While shepherds gather watching, or silent flocks by night, behold throughout the heavens there shone a holy light. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The shepherds feared and trembled when low above the earth rang out the angel chorus that hailed our Savior
kids can be released to Sunday school or nursery.
Good morning. All right. Realized I hadn't tested this. Hopefully it sounds okay. My name is Ted Anderson. I'm subbing for Todd. Todd and Jenny are on what we hope is the last little leg here of their immigration stuff, and then they should be back very soon, Lord willing. So just as a way of introduction, Jay and I have been coming to Emmaus since basically the summer of 2007. At that stage, we had 2 kids that were still youth group age, and they both were involved with that. And we've been through the downs and the ups of Emmaus since then. So welcome. And this morning, we had a perfect advertisement for we are looking for help on the snow removal team, which could also double as the ice removal team. So if there's anybody, we've got a sign-up sheet I noticed still in the back there. There's an Emmaus Kids meeting following the service. It's in the conference room just over off of the main entrance. Make sure I get all these announcements right. The Christmas service is on the 23rd. We typically do an Eve of Eve service. That's at 6 p.m. Certainly that's something you could invite a friend to or family or whatever. And we continue with the rhythm that the first Sunday of every month at 8:30 we have a prayer, kind of first Sunday prayer in the conference room here as well. Something to keep in mind in the future is the districts for our youth group. And right now, according to what I've got, there are 44 students and 13 adults that are going to that. That's January 10th through 12th. So that's something to keep praying for a lot of the students. That's a big, can be a life-changing event for a lot of folks. Our annual, now we're getting way out there, but we need to, at a minimum, announce this a couple of times. So Sunday, February 2nd, right after our morning church service is our annual meeting. There'll be a potluck. And then if anybody's interested, we're having an organizational meeting for the Honduras Well Project. And that's going to be a mission trip that happens, and that we're planning on having that organizational meeting on the 9th of February. Did I forget anything that anybody can think of? I'm going to double check. I think we got all of it. Okay, so we'll open with prayer, and then we'll get into the message here. Dear Lord, I thank you for everyone that is here, and those that can't be here. I ask that you'd watch over Todd and Jenny and their entire family. Make this last little bit, give them the patience, the discernment that they need. Even help Todd and Jenny navigate with the travels back home, whether it's through immigration and all the little things. Make that an extremely smooth event, and then the homecoming and the Christmas season, just something to be joyful and something to remember with a family that's united and set to face the new year. Watch over the morning service here. I pray that you'd be with me. May everything I say be from you and something that's of value and applicable, and either help folks forget or me not even say things that are not helpful at all. Bless our time together now. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so I'm going to be going over a passage out of John 10, which if you're using the Bibles that are in the back, that's page 896. And I'm entitled this Meditation on John 10. So this is not, I'm not going to attempt to be super like exegetical and parse every word and look at all of the But what I'm doing is something typically that has been helpful for me in my daily sort of Bible study. There's been two modes that I've been in through the years with kind of personal quiet time with Jesus. One of them is like on a schedule where I attempt to go through the Bible in a year or something like that. And there's certainly some advantages to that because you end up in context getting a lot of things that you might avoid. It's a little bit like when Pastor Todd picks a chapter of the Bible and we just go through it. You're going to end up with stuff that you would not just pick out and go, oh, I want to do a message on that. So that there's an advantage to that. The other thing recently, the last couple of years that I've done is simply go through at whatever pace I can go through. And so this was prompted some of the meditation today, and I'll finish with that with a poem by the name of a guy called Malcolm Guite. And it's not a lengthy poem, it's not anything, but just the way the poem was laid out made me rethink about what's in John 10, including Jesus' birth coming and Christmas and some of those kind of things. So it feels like it's an applicable kind of Christmas possible series. So one of the things that you think of when Jesus came to earth is he came to earth, he became a human being. One of the primary purposes was so he could die. And you go, okay, that's like the overarching big thing. But I think another reason that Jesus came to earth was to try to enlighten the human race as to who God was. If you look, for example, in Isaiah, I think it's chapter 6, I mean, there's this vision of the throne room. And Isaiah goes through this stuff, and I get done reading passages like that, and I go, I don't know what Isaiah just saw. Did he take some kind of a hallucinogenic thing? What actually is happening with what he's seen? And I think one of the things is Jesus came at a specific time, a specific place, into a specific family. So, and just being a normal human being. He was born what looks like the son of a carpenter. And you kind of wonder, so how to kill all of the babies, male babies, under the age of 2. And so Joseph gets a dream, and Joseph moves the entire family to Egypt. And I was thinking, what are my earliest memories? So for me, some of my earliest memories, I can remember sitting, and I don't know how well you know St. Paul, but sometimes when I'm going to the airport, I take this route down 7th Street, and right at 7th and Maynard, there's an apartment complex that goes back. And some of my earliest memories are Sibley Manor, looking out the window, trying to figure out what car types there are. And then the other thing that I remember are events that were traumatic. So for example, I had the mumps. I remember sitting in the apartment with my grandma, and she was trying to force feed me Cheerios. I have never liked Cheerios since then. All I can think of with Cheerios is like they just hurt to swallow them. I don't care how much you soak them, just swallowing them. And so then I'm thinking, Jesus, so if he was approximately 2 or under when they get to Egypt, and looking through some of the historical stuff, I did some, Dr. Google knows, I don't know if he does or not, but Jesus might have been as old as 6 before Joseph got the vision to go back to Nazareth. So at 6, Jesus is going to remember Egypt. So what's going on in Egypt? Did Joseph continue with his carpentry trade? I don't know. Did he pick up some new tips and tricks on, making stuff? And then at what age is Jesus helping Joseph in the shop, right? I know, we get, if you're a person that has got a job that allows you to be at home and whatnot, at what point are you bringing the kids into the shop or whatever? It depends on what's going on, obviously. So then you get the trip back to Nazareth when Herod died. And Jesus had half-brothers as we're going through. So did all of them learn the carpentry trade? Did Jesus, the first time he pulled out a square, make a perfect square corner for that piece of furniture? How many times was he out there planing and missed and took a little nick out of his finger? Or what's going on with the hammer? I mean, did Jesus, we know that he's perfectly human. Did he ever miss has got a time where he's missing a thumbnail? because he slammed it on something. So what is those gap years? And for me, thinking through this and then going and applying it to a passage like John 10, so what is Jesus bringing from his background into John 10? He did not live in a vacuum, right? So we know that he's living in a specific time, a specific place. His mission obviously was to come and die for us so that we would be forgiven of our sins. But what does that look like? I mean, did he try to explain the Trinity? Did he try to explain, how God works with humans? And I'm thinking he did. Another example that baffles me of seeing like throne rooms and stuff is like Revelation 4, where John has seen something. But the New Testament also shows us and tells us very explicitly that we are privileged now. So Hebrews 1, this is a quote from, I think it's, I didn't use NIV, I think it was New American Standard, but God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days, he has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the world. So the visions of the Old Testament are overwhelming, but the author of Hebrews is telling us we have got Jesus as an example of who God is. We don't have to see all of this other stuff. And so for me, the rejoicing that we have at Christmas is a little bit is we are on this side, Jesus' resurrection side of Jesus. We don't have to wonder. Some of the mystery of what and how God is speaking to us is now made known. My hope here today is, so one of the purposes I think of a message during a worship service is twofold. First, well, the big purpose is to glorify Jesus, but there are two people likely in the room. One set of people probably are looking for something just to hang on for another week. They know Jesus. It's been a tough week. The week coming up doesn't look so great. And so one of the purposes of a Sunday morning service is to encourage each other, both as we gather, but also through the message, through singing. The other purpose is, if there's somebody in the room that does not know Jesus, is to make Jesus attractive enough that you want to know him. And so those are my two purposes this morning. So I know Christmas especially can be a time, I mean, we've had some tough Christmases, and I'm sure everybody else has, and we've had some good Christmases. Maybe this is a first Christmas for you where you've lost somebody that's close to you or something like that. So hopefully there's something here with our corporate gathering this morning that'll be helpful. Okay, so John, that's quite an introduction, sorry. John 10:1. Truly, truly, I say to you, the one who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But the one who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. So one of the things I looked at in kind of background for this is, what does a sheep enclosure look like in the first century? And there's like a couple different varieties. So for example, early in the season, depending on where you start, when all the sheep are gathered together, there are often multiple flocks in the same building. And so what ends up happening is you have a sheepfold that to me would be called like a barn, right? It's got a roof over it, it's got a door, it's got walls around it, and you often had multiple flocks that ended up in the same spot because it was so expensive to build, each person have one of those kind of sheepfolds. The second thing that happens is as the pasture near the sheepfold gets to be chewed down, they start spreading out. And so kind of the end point is you get up into the highest ground, the freshest pasture. You don't have time to build something with a roof over it. You end up with a low, probably rock wall, given the Middle East, and an opening that becomes the sheepfold. So at night, the shepherd would herd, and at this point, the shepherd is all by himself. He doesn't have a group of shepherds. Usually one guy with all the sheep herds them all into the sheepfold, and then they settle down for the night. The low walls probably would not entirely prevent a predator from getting in, but it slowed things down. So sheep know where they're supposed to go. Sheep know their shepherd, and we'll get into some of that here. So verse 3, to him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep listen to his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he puts all his own sheep outside, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. However, a stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. The other thing likely that would happen in that big enclosure is there are multiple shepherds, and the sheep would recognize the voice of their shepherd that they were going to go with. So splitting the sheep every morning, even when they had the big enclosure, got to be fairly straightforward. The shepherd would say, hey, whatever they used to call, I don't know, it probably wasn't come boss, come boss, come boss. It was something that they'd recognize that, hey, this is my shepherd. I'm going with that particular shepherd. So one of the things back when I was doing cattle, we did not do dairy cattle, but for about 4 months, my beef cows, I would go out as the sun was coming up in the summertime, and then just before sundown, I'd be out again. I'd get the cows up, and I'd walk around, and I'd get them into an enclosure, and I would watch, because we did not have a bull. We were AIing everything. And so figuring out who was in heat was pretty easy. But one of the things I realized was those guys knew me. They would almost expect me. I'd come out, the sun's down, some of them would be laying down, doing whatever, they're chewing their cud, sleeping, whatever it is that a cow does. Some of them would be up. And on the one hand, I'd kind of heard them, but for the most part, I had a couple of, I'd be talking to myself, I'd be talking to the cows, you just kind of use a low voice. And I wanted them calm because if you get them all worked up, the whole deal with breeding them is going to go right out the door. Everybody's got to be relaxed. Everybody's got to know. And what I realized is they knew me. If I took somebody else out there, which is rare, number one, my wife is not enamored with getting up at 5:30 in the morning just to go out and take a walk. Number two, we didn't usually have visitors at that time of day. But if anybody else would show up, like my dad sometimes would come, and he was part ownership with me on all of this stuff. But just the presence of somebody else would work them up, right? So at some point, they knew my voice. The other thing is, Jay's had sheep and horses through the years, and I'm amazed when I see she goes out and will rattle a bucket and just, I don't know what, sometimes it's just, hey, horses. You just hey, horses, rattle the bucket, and all of a sudden you got this, however many, right now it's just one, which is really nice. We're kind of winding down. But they come thundering up the hill. They're looking for a treat. I could never understand somebody that had kind of a hobby. I want to go for a trail ride, and it'd take you all afternoon to get your horse. I mean, you're out there. We're in a couple of, you go, just train these guys to come. But it's the same kind of thing. Whether the only animal that I've encountered that has not come when you call them is once Jay and I got roped into doing buffalo for like helping with the vaccination thing with buffalo, and I'm telling you, never again. So if anybody's got buffalo and they want our help, forget it. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not. Now, sheep can be moved, as can anything else, cows or whatever, in a different way. We have neighbors right now that have border collies, right? So the calling doesn't work. The herding does. Now, I don't know how much fear-based is in that, because eventually even the sheep know that, okay, let's just get this over with. Here they go again with the dog thing, and they kind of, but these dogs are good. They took them down the road a bit to another pasture at a neighbor's, and they just got the dogs out on the road and herd the whole thing down there. So one of the things, though, that this reminds me of that's applicable is, do we know the voice of our shepherd? And how do you get to know the voice of Jesus? How does that happen, right? So if you take it from the sheep realm, which is what Jesus is talking about here, right, to the human realm, the sheep, it takes time. They're not super smart, right? So it takes, over time, you've got to be with them. So that takes a sacrifice from the owner, but it also takes, the sheep are, maybe that's a poor analogy, it doesn't take any sacrifice. But we've got to spend time with Jesus to be able to know and hear his voice. Like when we're making big decisions, we got to know. So I'm probably looking at me, you can tell, I'm getting toward the end both of my physical life and my vocational life, right? So I'm starting to read books that have to do with like finishing well. And I've read some books that are so far above me that I just go, this is not applicable. I can't. But every once in a while, you go through a book and you go, this one, like one of the books is built around various kind of scenarios and people that this guy has interviewed and all those kind of things. And there's a couple of gems in this one book that I found really helpful. And this guy, he was about my age, but he'd done this his entire life. When he had a big decision that he was going to make that was going to take him off to who knows where, in this case, changing vocation or changing what you're doing retirement-wise or whatever, he would make sure he was carving out extra length of time for his quiet time with God. And he would read a passage, and he'd just sit. And parts of this book were written back when newspapers were more of a thing, right? But it's the same problem. You pick up your newspaper in the morning, and you never set it down, and you look up and you go, I just blew my hour that I was going to do something. Put everything down, turn everything off, and just sit. Now, some people will complain, well, what happens if I fall asleep? You go, well, falling asleep when you're praying or falling asleep when you're reading at some point, he'd realized that he was being steered towards something that just felt like this was the next thing. And then if it came into his head, he'd pray about it for a good piece of time, not just rush into it. From my advice, that's how am I going to know when Jesus is speaking to me? I got to take the time and be with Jesus. That's the only way I can think of it. Okay, so verse 6, chapter 10, Jesus told them this figure of speech, but they did not understand what the things which he was saying to them meant. So in other words, he'd just gone through this, and they hadn't picked it up. Now, one of the things, I was thinking, okay, so Jesus is a patient teacher, right? He looks at him and he goes, everybody's eyes are, the disciples are sitting around and they're like gone. They absolutely did not understand what he was saying. And so what we're going to get is almost like a repeat of what he just said, except stated a little differently. So Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All those who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved, and I will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came so that they would have life and have it abundantly. I was just thinking the whole reading the room thing, one of the things that I ended up having to do through the years at work was do presentations. There was one guy that we had that if I could get him to do the presentation, he was amazing. If you gave him 5 minutes, he could encapsulate what needed to be said to a client in 5 minutes. If you gave him an hour, he could expand it out and give them all the details that they needed for an hour. He could look at a room and start either going back over, or suddenly I realize he's kind of cracking jokes or something, and I go, oh, he's kind of like loosening them up again, and then he goes back in. It's just quite a gift. And if Jesus, the perfect presenter is what, right? So he's going to read the room and go, man, okay. And he never gets exasperated, like never going, man, I can't believe they didn't get it. But he patiently goes back over it. So this feels like he took kind of like a do-over. He's partway through and he goes, okay, I'm going to try to repeat the same thing, use the words a little differently, and see if I can get to it. The one thing that he does is he specifically now is saying he's the door. Okay, so what is a door in the context of a sheepfold, and what's a door in the context of a guy that has been in a carpentry shop? Immediately I start jumping to, okay, so is he thinking about the wood on the door? Is he thinking about, I bet you they did not have like pre-hung doors in first century Middle East kind of stuff. I bet you that there was standard measurements or something, and Joseph says, well, if you see this kind of a door, you're going to want to put the hinges this far apart. You're going to want to bolt them on. If you're going into a rock wall on this side, you're going to need this versus the wood on that side. What all the standard pieces of the door is. I have no idea how that all played out. But the other thing with a door is those sheepfolds that were out that had an opening, the shepherd was the door. When he got all the sheep in for the night, he would lay across that door, so anything that was coming in, even if he was asleep, was literally going to have to go over his body or through his body. And you start thinking about that, and I go, so is that what he's trying to communicate to the disciples? I am the door. If you guys would just follow me, and then he's trying to let them know what, the characteristics of a thief are, right? The thief, the guy you can't trust, is coming over the wall. Or the thief is the guy that is trying to get through me, but I'm not going to let him get through me. So there's an element of Jesus is providing kind of like safe harbor. He is the door. So as his sheep, shouldn't we be like part of being a Christian, part of acknowledging who Jesus is rest assured that regardless of what's going around us, we should, in a sense, rest easy. All the confusion, all of the massive turmoil, whatever it is that's going on in your life, whether it's work or finances or relationships with, as we come up to Christmas, relationships with family or whatever it happens to be, it reminds me a little bit of Romans 8:28. Paul states with authority that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Do we really believe and trust that? God has a long view as well. It's not like it's going to be good right now. There's a verse that talks about, I don't remember if I kept it here or not. I did. 1 Kings 10. So Jeroboam was one of the first kings of Israel. He kind of was the young bucks, the son of Solomon got kicked out. God put Jeroboam in charge. And then Jeroboam essentially turned his back on God. And there's a passage in 1 Kings that is like, I read it and then I go back and read it again. So God said, you will not have an heir that will ever sit on the throne, is the message. And so Jeroboam has got a kid that's been born, so it's infant. He sends his wife, I believe, to go to the prophet and see if this kid is going to survive. And the prophet said, as soon as you set foot back over the threshold at home, that child dies. And the reason he dies is God found something good in him. And you go, that? So rather than all of the prophecy that's happened with all the rest of this guy's offspring, if they die in the city, they're going to be eaten by dogs. If they die in the country, they're going to be food for the, like the birds of the air and those kind of things. God said, I found something good in this kid, and he's going to die. And you go, that's not our modern view of how the world works. We are so keyed into the current safety, the current whatever it happens to be. Sometimes we don't see God's view. And even that statement to me, I don't fully understand that passage. That's one of those little things where you go, I don't really understand how that works. But do we trust that if we are God's sheep, he's got the door, that he will take care of us? That's the big thing. And Jesus, later on, not much later, actually died for us. And that really confused the disciples as well. Part of turning our lives over to Jesus, repenting, and giving authority to him in our lives, trusting and resting and knowing that he is our door. Anybody that tries to circumvent the door are thieves and robbers. He Jesus is offering us life. So basically he's saying, please take this life. The converse is also true. If somebody doesn't come in through the door, sneaks in over the wall, they come to kill and steal and destroy, even though it might look good in the short term. Jesus is giving clear direction on who to trust. There's another opening as I was reading this poem from Malcolm Guite. I go, I'd never thought of this as an opening in the same sense. When Jesus is on the cross, and at the same time he says, it is finished, there's another door essentially that's ripped open instead of closed. It's the veil in the curtain, in the Holy of Holies. God ripped that from top to bottom, and now there is no need for that Holy of Holies. Jesus has given us access into the throne room that took repeated sacrifice. And one of the things that strikes me is that I end up looking at history, and those kind of things are interesting. So correlating events in the Bible, especially New Testament events, with other historical references is rather fascinating in my view. But Jesus is looking at what's happened even after, before the veil was ripped, but he's seen more than just that veil being ripped. He's going, my kin, my Jewish brothers and sisters, would you please acknowledge that I now am the sacrifice that's happened once for all. You don't need any other sacrifice. And they go, nope, they keep going on with that sacrificial system. And Jesus is seeing the time when that temple gets totally obliterated. And one of the last acts that happens in that temple, is Titus ends up sacrificing a pig on that Holy of Holies altar, and then he destroys it. And you go, Jesus is trying to speak to his own Jewish kin, and they're kind of like just totally ignoring it. Jesus goes and he wipes out the temple, he wipes out that altar, and now, literally, if you look at what the follow-up to how the Jewish nation and the Jewish, I don't know what you want to call it, religion after that point, attempts to do things, they really have to get creative because that sacrificial system is gone. So how, the whole process of how they decide how they're going to do synagogues and all that kind of thing. And all I can think is, it makes me go to, Romans 11, I believe it is, where it talks about, the fullness of Gentiles are going to come in, but then the entire nation of Israel is also going to turn to Jesus. And you go, so at some point, there actually is going to be, the mix of future and past and some of that kind of thing I find confusing at times. But at some point, the entire Jewish nation will end up, I believe, if you take that chunk of Romans at least literally, is going to come to Jesus and recognize him as the sacrifice, as their Messiah, as what they need. So then, what does this mean for us, modern day, what is this, 2024, almost 2025? I mean, how do we go forward? Usually, so there's the rest portion. We can rest in knowing that Jesus is the door. Jesus essentially has our back. He's got our front. He's got however you want to look at it. Jesus' body literally was decimated as the door. And then he proved by God resurrecting him again that door, you can't get through that door, right? If we would stay with him, there's no way that you can get through that door. And I think sometimes as we wander around, Jesus finally goes, okay, so you're not listening to my voice. I'm going to have to get behind you and drive you back in, right? So I think sometimes what ends up happening is we don't take the time to listen to Jesus' voice. We end up having to deal with Jesus' voice anyway. He loves us, and it's a little bit like every once in a while, of the animals, hopefully I'm not insulting, that we've dealt with, sheep have got to be about the dumbest, right? There's been a couple of times where we go out. We did not let our sheep go too far out in the back, but every once in a while you find somebody on their back, and you go, oh my word. Or Jay had set up, we had the Electronet fence, and I've never seen anybody get wrapped in so it's like a mesh fence that you can roll out, put it up, run electricity through it. One day we actually sat and watched all the cats go through it and then back out again. We just set up lawn chairs watching them all get shocked. It was like the most entertaining. But then sheep, I don't know what the deal is with, I've never seen them get rolled into that stuff. And you come out and you go, oh my word, you got somebody all rolled up tight, and they are just, and they go, man, how long have they been there like this? You go, oh, now, usually per sheep that was like once. It didn't happen too many times, but you just go, these guys are not. And sometimes I think the analogy that Jesus uses with us as sheep is, please follow me. It's almost like we can do this the hard way, or we can wrap you up in an electric net, whatever, until you get this, okay? Please follow me, right? So I think that's one of our jobs, is just to be, and so rest in the Lord. I don't know how that all works, because there's 100 years or whatever, but the entire Jewish nation coming to Jesus and recognizing him as their Messiah, wouldn't that be something to, so what is my sort of, 2025, like, going forward things? Number one, I need to, pay attention to Jesus' voice. I really should be done with the electric shock stuff. It's really not my thing, even though I keep doing it. But just recognize that we are safe behind the sheepfold and the shepherd of Jesus. I'm going to close this portion anyway with this poem from Malcolm Guite. And I'll just make a little bit of a comment. So my mom was an English teacher, and she did not really pick on me too much for like my grammar stuff but I knew that if I didn't write something, like you turn in a paper, and if you're going to have your mom proof it, it was going to be a fairly harsh proof. But the other thing was, she introduced me to literature. There's the name just escaped me. Ogden Nash is like an American poet that did not take himself very seriously. And I just love it. He had these little things, and the one that I recall, and then turns out it's probably not Ogden Nash, but Mom we'd be working on something in the kitchen, and all of a sudden she'd just say, Algie met a bear. The bear was bulgy. The bulge was algae. And then we'd move on. And I go, so poems can be kind of like these weird, the sound of the tones, who knows who algae is or whatever it happens to be. But it somewhat opened me up to, okay, maybe I should be reading literature. Then I found an old book. It's called The Bedside Book of Humor. It's like this weird stuff that you go, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then growing up, she was the church librarian, which we met in a school that we rented. And it meant neither my dad nor I were carpenters. Somebody from the church made us a big bookcase that would fit specifically into the trunk of one of my dad's cars. So every Sunday morning, Dad and I'd lift this thing into the trunk of the car. We'd bring it in. We'd roll it in. People would check out books. But the thing that meant for me was I had free access to books all week long because I didn't have to check them out. And so I ended up with all kinds of, so I think what it taught me is poems don't have to be these super stuffy kind of, big long things. And it's made me open to looking. And then when I find a Christian poet that actually does a riff, and this is a riff on John 10, you go, oh, that's kind of cool. So this is Malcolm Guite, and this is his poem. Let's see if I don't read poetry real well, so we'll see how it goes here. I am the door of the sheepfold, not one that's gently hinged or deftly hung, not like the ones you planed at Joseph's place, not like the well-oiled openings that swung so easily for Pilate's practiced pace. not like the ones that closed in Mary's face from house to house in brimming Bethlehem, not like the one that no man may assail, the dreadful curtain, the forbidding veil that waits your breaking in Jerusalem. Not one you made, but one you've become. Load-bearing, balancing, a weighted beam to bridge the gap, to bring us within reach of your high pasture, calling us by name. You lay your body down across the breach, yourself the door that opens into home. Okay, we have one more song. You don't. Oh, all right. So I will pick up my stuff and we will close. So there will be, even though I was a little nervous, I talked to Bobby beforehand. I looked at the schedule for who the prayer team was, and one's in Ireland and one's in Colombia. So they won't be here. So Bobby will, if anybody's got anything they'd like prayer for, have prayer up over there, whether it's maybe something that's going on in your life, or maybe even you'd like to talk about becoming a Christian, or what it takes to be a Jesus follower, or whatever. We can certainly cover that. So let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you for who you are, and I thank you that you came and tried to describe to us, even through things like I am the door, what that might mean in the context of a sheepfold. Help us to rest in you. Help us to recognize that you have paid the price, and that we've got this amazing privilege being on this side of the resurrection. Just help us recognize who you are and give you honor for that. I pray that you'd be with each one of us. The little that I know about each person in the room, I know there's a lot of things going on, that a lot of unknowns in a lot of folks' lives, and I just pray that you'd watch over them, you protect them. I thank you for the gathering of believers, and help us support each other, whether it's sharing in joys or bearing each other's burdens. Just bless us as we go, and give us all a safe trip home. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed.